You know, there's a gorgeous line in the Gospel of Matthew, and I very much like it because we often think about the messages that seem to us, come to us from Christianity, which are divisive. But this passage really puts a lie to that in the most invigorating kind of a way. And it's this, and it says, "You are all children of the divine." I don't hear any qualifications there, do you? No. "You are all children of the divine, the one who makes his sun to rise on wrongdoers and the good, and sends rain to the just and the unjust equally." I find that a completely glorious, totally hope-filled statement. In other words, you do not need to be worthy of being loved or to regard yourself as lovable. You are loved. You are lovable. I mean, the challenge is to live up to it, but you don't have to be worthy of it. You can free yourself from that kind of rather narrow judgment, you know, if I do this or if I do that, or should I do this or can't I do that. It makes of life a much more vigorous and invigorating adventure, which is exactly what it should be. It should be vigorous and it should be invigorating, because otherwise we cannot live hopefully. I was very moved by the words that Sarah shared with us, and particularly the words that she brought to us out of her experience of working professionally but also spiritually with people who are leaving this life, and who in a very concentrated way will be given the opportunity to really think about what has mattered. What has mattered. And actually, if we had an ounce of common sense, we wouldn't leave it till then. But we're struggling, most of us, to have an ounce of common sense, aren't we? But let's take this moment also to take something from that, to know that we have an opportunity every single day to know what matters to us and what really doesn't, and to pay more attention to what matters and rather less to what doesn't matter. The first time that Sarah met me, but I didn't, I think, meet her on that day, I was asked to give a presentation to a group of palliative care, mainly physicians, but also nurses and other people who work professionally and spiritually with the dying. And I was asked to speak on hope, and I found it particularly challenging, actually invigoratingly challenging. Because in the medical model, of course, people quite sincerely talk about having given up hope. What they mean is that the physical body can no longer heal. And that was a very instructive context for me to kind of to investigate, to interrogate, and to challenge. Because, of course, all healing, all true healing is not physical. It's spiritual. So that kind of healing continues to the very last breath, if we are lucky. And Sarah gave us such a beautiful example of that in her invitation to this man who had felt so alone, and in a moment recognized that he still had something to give. And in that giving, he was giving and experiencing connection. So when I thought about my talk for that particular gathering, and I really experienced it as a real opportunity also to bring something as well as to gain something from that particular conference. There were two qualities that I wanted to stress very particularly in thinking about hope when in the medical model there is no hope. And one of them was connection. That until that final exhale, we need to know that we are connected. The greatest anguish that we feel as human beings, as human souls, is to feel abandoned. But of course, sometimes in our hardest moments, the person who abandons us is ourselves. Yeah? So when we think about hope, I think we also need to think very, very deeply about something that comes even deeper, I think, than hope, and that is trust. So when we are tempted to feel shaky inside, or despairing, or hopeless, or so confused that we don't know in which direction to look for hope, I think we then need to really let ourselves be inspired to receive something that restores not just hope, actually, but trust that our life still matters, that we are still connected to the goodness that is in us and is in all beings, that we are connected to the wonder and to the mystery. Don't even need to call it the divine, but just call it life. That while we have life, we are life. And we can trust that. And there is that odd saying, isn't it, where there's life, there's hope. But let's even just move it into something deeper. Where there's life, there can be trust. Not least that something will emerge in the next moment that lifts us. It is one of our most incredible capacities that a moment's kindness, such as Sarah showed to that man in his moment of aloneness, that when she offered him the invitation and when she affirmed for him that his praying for the world was of value, she gave him a great gift of connection. And she also gave him another gift. And that was the second thing that I talked about on that day. That when in the conventional model there is no hope, we need still to feel connected to life, even as we're leaving it. That transition time is extraordinarily precious. We might experience life more fully in that moment as we re-enter the eternal life. We might recognize with a particular poignancy and passion what this brief life means to us and what we're leaving behind. And in those moments, but in all the countless moments that will precede that, that are shaping us for that time also, the other quality that we most particularly need, and there is no trust without it, is compassion. Compassion, so that when we judge ourselves, when we judge others, we can soften our hearts and really recognize what we share and also what we can give. When we can share and we can give and we can receive what others are willing to give us. When we think about hope, we often think about what we're hoping for. We often think, too, about the hope that we want to offer to other people, and we think about the hope that we want others to inspire in us. And there is something in that dance that is particularly and quite exquisitely melodic. We give each other hope. If we are fortunate enough, we will allow ourselves to be inspired by one another, to renew hope. And that with that dance, we re-enter the trustingness that, and I'll read it again, you are all children of the divine. You don't need to believe it. You can just feel it. You can just feel that you are part of this life. And part of this life is the mystery of what the power and the energy of life really is. We can't define that in words. We can't even grasp it through the wonders of music or silence, but we can feel it. And it is that feeling of it, and that being open to that feeling of it, that brings us back to this place. The one who makes his sun to rise on wrongdoers and the good. And we are all that. We are wrongdoers and the good. And sends rain, the rain of inspiration, the rain of new light, the living waters to the just and the unjust equally. You do not need to deserve it. You have it. I'm just going to finish with a beautiful, beautiful few lines from Einstein, who was also quite untroubled by questions of belief. A human being, he said, is part of the whole, called by us a universe. A part limited in time and space, he experiences himself, his thoughts, and his feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. Isn't that lovely? In other words, we just haven't grasped it. We haven't put on the glasses yet to see it. This delusion is a kind of prison for us because it restricts us to our personal decisions and our affections to a few people nearest to us. Our task, says Einstein, our task in sharing the light, our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living creatures, to embrace ourselves too. We are the ones that we can too easily leave out. So, back to Einstein. To embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Blessed be.